Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another edition of MJ Everyday, a training-based episode for you guys today. And you guys are in for a treat because we have our resident masseuse, Jake Watson, in the house. What up, Jake?
Nothing much, man.
We
knowledge bombs with you.
Yeah, for the viewers, MJ Everyday, as you do every now and again. I put a post up on Instagram about grip position when pressing for chest.
Yeah.
And I asked my followers, I said, what sort of grip position do you guys usually use when you're doing, chest presses, flat press, incline press, decline press, barbell, dumbbell, is it shoulder width? Is it closer than shoulder width? Is it wider than shoulder width? If it is, how wide? And I got a whole mixed bag of responses.
Yeah.
And the reason why I was asking the question was primarily for this episode of MJ Everyday, and I wanted to get your opinion on the ideal position to grip when you are pressing to achieve maximum chest stimulation, but keeping in mind trying to minimize the risk of shoulder injury.
My training background is pretty much solely strength based, so it's always been around performance. It's never been entirely about muscle growth, but a big part of performance based training is that injury prehab has always been a huge part of it. So when someone asks me a question like what's the ideal position for with something like this, you need to realize that the concept of one singular ideal thing, it's a bit of like this esoteric concept that doesn't really apply, because obviously there's huge structural difference between people and you're going to have subtle differences in limb length, torso structure, all this kind of thing. So it's not going to be a one rule suits everyone.
And that might explain why I got such a mixed bag of opinions.
Which is why you would have gotten a huge myriad bag of responses.
On the Instagram post. Continue.
Because you could take two people with like very similar shoulder structures, chest structures, and then you're going to chuck an upper arm length that's got a 10 centimeter variance between the two people. And obviously, weightlifting ultimately is about lever lengths, when you're looking at efficiency of movement and muscular activation. So if someone's got huge, massively long arms, they're not necessarily going to feel comfortable and protected in the same position as someone with really, really short T-Rex arms.
Sure.
Which is why you see a lot of huge guys with massive bench presses have really, really short arms. Conversely to that, when you're looking at a movement like a bench press, you're also looking at things like maximizing tricep activation. You're going to get some people that are inherently more tricep dominant in their strength, and they're going to naturally lean towards that. Now that's looking at it from a strength perspective, but where you can move the most weight isn't necessarily where you're going to stimulate the most muscle growth as well, because you might find that you're super, super strong in a close grip, but you're not getting the same pec activation because you're just relying on the muscles that are already strong.
Yeah.
And conversely, sometimes in the areas where you feel weakest, you might feel the weakest there because a lagging muscle group like your chest might be under the most strain there, and that's where you need to be putting yourself. So that's probably one thing to keep in mind with this.
Yeah.
What's always going to feel best performance-wise isn't necessarily the best muscle building wise, and a lot of people need to realize that there's no direct correlation between weight moved and muscle built when it comes to bodybuilding.
And we gotta put that shit, fucking rewind.
And a lot of people need to realize that there's no direct correlation between weight moved and muscle built when it comes to bodybuilding.
That is so important. And it plays into like dominant and non-dominant muscle groups. You're always gonna tend towards doing exercises the way that your body is built to do them, and everyone's bodies are built different. You're always going to tend towards doing exercises that are going to capitalize on your strengths and mitigate your weaknesses.
Absolutely.
But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about best
building
grip
muscle. Yeah.
for building chest and minimizing risk of shoulder injury.
Absolutely. So probably like one of the easiest things that we can attack this from is looking at a prehab position for your shoulders and making sure you're not going to get injured. Now, one thing that we did comment on with this shortly before I'm starting to film this was that grip width has a huge part to play, but also where that's going to put you in terms of alignment on your shoulder capsule. So if I'm not on a bar here, so we're going to have to bear with me. But if I've got, kind of like a pretty moderate grip, but I'm positioning my shoulder up here, we've got to look at, we're looking at terms of muscle stimulation. My pec's not going to fire off effectively with my arm in this big chicken wing position. I'm holding a lot of tension up in my trap, which is going to naturally internally rotate that shoulder. That's putting that anterior deltoid at a very vulnerable spot and having to take over a lot of the work. So before we even look at grip width, we can safely say to just lower that arm a little bit and make sure we're retracting that shoulder over. That's going to let that nice big strong lat and all those scap stabilizers keep that shoulder safe and healthy. It's also going to put that pec first and foremost in the movement prior to the anterior delt having to take over and fire. Now that anterior delt dominance is a huge part of why people blow out their shoulders during bench. Same as that elevated position, holding too much tension in the trap and anteriorly rotating that humeral bone in and putting it at a very vulnerable position in that shoulder capsule. Now, conversely, once we look at that, so we're making sure we've got our humeral bone in that nice angled position, then we're starting to look at things like grip width. Now, if I start bringing my arm out further and further and further out, I've lengthened that lever. Now, we know pretty accurately that a longer lever in any movement is going to put additional strain on the muscle. You know, anyone who's ever done lateral raise like this versus like this can pretty testify that holding that hand further out is going to put a lot more strain on it. That's where we want to look at the difference between additional strain on the muscle versus unnecessary strain on the joint, right? Because there's a huge, huge difference between that. And if I can get a really nice chest activation in this just kind of like outer shoulder width grip here, and my shoulder's in a pretty safe spot here. It's a really easy place for me to stabilize my shoulder blade, keep that scap flat, keep that shoulder down, really activate all those stabilizing muscles. And then I go and do something like this. I might find that I can hit my chest a little bit harder through it. You're not going to get as much peak contraction at the top of that movement, like really bringing those pecs together. But the trade-off is, while you might be placing that pec under more strain, you're also putting that shoulder girdle under a hell of a lot more strain. So that's when we're looking at risk versus reward on some of our exercises. While you might be able to get a little bit more of strain on that dominant muscle group, you're also got to look at the longevity of how long you can keep putting your things under stress like that. Which then you can start looking at things like, well, maybe that's a good grip position to activate some extra pec, but we're looking at higher reps and less weight. Because you got to realize what we've talked about previously as well, that all structures are kind of dominated by their weakest link. So that's when you got to be a little bit smarter in terms of, maybe this isn't the best spot to be going heavy, maybe this is something I'm going to be punching for more sets, more reps, and a lot lighter weight. And then when I'm in that safer position, where I've got a few more muscle groups contributing and keeping that whole girdle structure safe, that's where I'm going to be pushing more weight out. And then like you've got that final position which you're looking at, which is that close grip. I found close grip for a lot of people, it can be a little bit nicer on their shoulders. Obviously you've got that lever in probably its shortest position in terms of here, but you're going to find that you're probably going to be activating the tricep a hell of a lot more. So that's just looking at 3 variables on the grip. And the overall dominating factor is making sure that that shoulder is staying in a slightly lower position than having that thing right out. Like, you don't want to be benching like this because it's just all shoulders. It's a horrible position for the delt and the arm trap to be in. And you're really, really putting that shoulder going in a vulnerable position. And when we're looking at a super wide one, you can do it. Like, you know, I've had a lot of power lifters. We'll use this as an accessory work. It can actually be really good for training shoulder stability. So like, you know, you can actually look at a different element again, where if you want to build your chest through a bigger bench press, obviously you got to look at exercises that are going to help you bench more. Using that as a standalone stability exercise can actually be massively beneficial. And it's just knowing the difference between when to treat something as an accessory and when to treat it as a main movement where you're looking at heaps of weight as well.
Fucking profound, mate. I can't even look at you right now. I can't even make eye contact. That was amazing. That was really, really good. I just obviously being behind the camera and filming you, I've just taken so much from that.
Hopefully it helps. There's a lot you can say about this stuff, but
it's crazy. And I think really kind of just to filter it down and distill it down for you guys, the first thing that you want to do before you even consider how wide your grip is drop those elbows.
Stabilize your scapulas, man.
Stabilize your scapula.
That
straight up.
Yeah, like you see a winged scapula, like straight away, basically, if we're going to look at this, like, by stabilize your scaps, because let's just like really break this down, we're talking about not benching like this, okay? You see that scap's winged right out. Now, as soon as that happens, that trap's going to elevate, that shoulder's going to roll forward. You're going to have a whole myriad of issues come from this. In its simplest form, just tucking back and stabilizing back through there. You'll see the anterior delt now is going to sit behind my pec, versus when I'm in that winged high position, that delt's going to sit forward of my pec. It's where you're going to see people in that slightly arched position through their upper back as well. So another thing just to throw in there, man, if you are having troubles with your shoulders in your bench press, mobilize your thoracic spine. So for those who don't know, your thoracic spine is this upper portion, and if that's really jacked up, stabilizing your shoulder blades isn't going to even come into it because you're not really going to be able to do it very well. So that's probably just like a nice little tip to throw in there. Make sure your upper back's nice and mobile. A lot of people don't think of their upper back health when it comes to their shoulders. So yeah, so like our first thing, stabilize your shoulder blades, and that's not sitting in that elevated position. And then taking that nice mid grip width is where you're gonna find that really nice sweet spot between able to move weight, activate your chest, and keep your shoulder in a healthy position. Wider grips, whilst can be good, you wanna look at moving less weight because it's such a vulnerable position. And as most of us know, that super narrow grip, you might just find that you start getting a whole lot more tricep dominance into that than what you're after. So
there you go. I don't really think I can add anything else to that.
I think that pretty much covers it.
That was pretty damn
without going
comprehensive.
into it too much.
Thank you, Jake.
No
Appreciate
worries,
the
brother.
insights, man. And guys, that's a wrap for today's episode of MJ Every Day, discussing which grip position is, or which grip width is best for pressing when you're trying to make those chest gains. As always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, turn your post notifications on, both on your mobile, your cell phone, and your desktop PC, so you don't miss a beat when it comes to the Massive Joes YouTube channel. Until tomorrow, I'm coming to you from MassiveJoes.com.
Stay massive.
Thank you for tuning into this video. We hope you enjoyed watching. Don't forget to check out our latest upload and our recommended video, and be sure to subscribe to the Massive Joes YouTube channel to stay up to date with all of our latest uploads.